Hello and welcome to another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Things from Cultured Code. I'm John Voorhees and Federico Vitici is with me. Hey, Ticci.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm having a great day. It's a holiday here in America and it's raining. I think I feel like the weather's
that you're working on a holiday.
Oh, it's fine. I work on most holidays, unfortunately. But that's a story for a different day. We are going to continue our wish list episodes. And today I made it very broad. I made it automation wishes because this is both going to be about shortcuts, but it's also going to be about Apple Intelligence. And, those things are all part of the same ball of wax, really. But there's a lot of aspects of this that I think go beyond even just Apple's technologies that we want to see implemented as part of some of these OS updates that allow third-party tools to come into the OSs as well. So we're going to kind of talk about all of that today. Sound good?
Yeah. Where do you want to start with this?
Well, I guess I wanted to start a little bit about sort of what we expect. I mean, most of this is going to be wishes, things that may or may not actually happen, but things that we want to have happen. But I do think there's some expectations, given all the rumors swirling around about Google Gemini being the basis for some of the Apple Intelligence and other things, that I think we can talk a little bit about our expectations and what our wishes are for, the expectations that happen to be out there right now. And one of those to me is I think we will see Foundation 2.0, which is Apple's foundation model that runs on device. I assume that will get an upgrade. And one of the things I'm going to be looking out for, I think, too, is some kind of indication from Apple about whether they're going to be more public about the updates to this. I mean, they have updated Foundation in the past before, kind of behind the scenes a little bit, I believe, but they haven't really talked about it that much. And I think with 2.0, it would be, given the way people are sort of building in public with various AI models, it'd be nice to see Apple kind of tout what's happening with the changes in the model over time, so people have a sense for whether it's improving or not.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, we're going to see maybe the second generation of Apple Foundation models, and that will obviously be the core topic and the sort of the feature that Apple would try to sell in the 27 family of OSs. And so I've been thinking about how they are going to roll this out. I think there's a scenario that I sort of foresee happening at WWDC, which would be version 2.0 of the on-device Apple Foundation model that is an Apple-trained, not Google-trained, but an in-house on-device foundation model that's going to be smarter than the first one, likely, I would say likely a bigger model maybe, with a bigger context window. I think right now they have a 4,000 token context window.
It's very
right?
small, yeah.
I think at the very least I would expect 8,000, so double the context window for the on-device model. Obviously, an on-device model needs to be small and needs to be high performance and low latency, so do not expect a huge model running on device, but a second generation of that model I think could be really nice for on-device classification tasks and coordination, some lightweight orchestration even. So I think we're going to see Gen 2 of that. And for the private cloud compute, I don't think we're going to see an Apple made Apple Intelligence Foundation model on private cloud compute. That's going to be the Gemini-backed version.
Right.
So I would expect a Gemini-based cloud foundation model that is based on Gemini, fine-tuned by Apple, labeled as Apple Intelligence in the cloud or something like that, with the same privacy guarantee as the first generation of Apple Intelligence in private cloud compute. I think that's going to be a big chunky model, 1 million context window, likely, what is Gemini, a 1.2 trillion model?
I think so.
Yeah.
Something around there.
I expect it to be based on Gemini 3.1 Flash and Pro. If I were to guess, I think it's going to be based on Gemini 3.1 Flash, not 3.5 Flash. If only because Gemini 3.5 Flash is not even out, I believe, at the moment.
Right, it's very new.
Yeah, I would expect that Apple has been working with 3.1 Flash for the past few months. Instead, I don't think it's going to be Pro because I don't think Apple wants the performance trade-off of a reasoning model in private cloud compute. Also, I don't think they have. I mean, if Google is giving them the servers to run it, sure. I think that Apple would just prefer a speedier model that's going to be way smarter than Siri anyway. So
Yeah, that's something I wanted to talk to you about a little bit, and just to interrupt for a second, which is, I mean, I know that I would say that the reaction to Gemini 3.5 has been pretty muted in that it's not considered to the standards of either OpenAI's models or Anthropic's. On the other hand, Apple will be going so far by adopting Gemini, even if it's not the equivalent of Opus or ChatGPT 5.5. It's still going to be remarkably better, I would think, than anything that we have today.
yeah, I mean, even Gemini 2.5 was going to be better than Siri today. So
Yeah.
I think 3.1 Flash could be a really nice improvement.
Mhm.
I am curious to see what they do for the promised features of Apple Intelligence from 2 years ago when it comes
Yeah.
to App Intents, third-party apps, and Siri being able to get context and perform actions across a spectrum of compatible third-party apps. I would not be shocked to hear that to make it work with the new model, since the situation has changed, right, compared to 2 years ago.
Yep.
And I think, given also how the rest of the industry has evolved, I wouldn't be shocked to see some kind of MCP bridge in between the on-device model, the apps, and the cloud model based on Gemini. I don't think I would be very surprised in a positive way if there's no MCP translation layer at all, and that actually Apple was able to get the Gemini model to understand app intents, the
Yeah.
whole schema, the domains, all the things that sort of they announced 2 years ago.
If it is MCP, I think it would almost by definition have to be private cloud compute given the context window, don't you think? Especially if someone has a lot of apps on their phone. I mean, it depends how they're architecting this, I suppose, but
No, I mean, in general, I just expect that the on-device model will not be able to orchestrate too many tools at once because it will not be that smart. I think it's going to be a small model. I do not expect. Have you ever tried running a small model, like a small Quen or a small Llama?
yeah, well,
And
I've
try to
tried.
give it tools? It sucks.
Yeah,
It's horrible.
I've tried building things with Apple's on-device model too,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
it's almost unusable. I'm always impressed when a developer comes up with a clever solution for the on-device model that Apple offers, because it's very hard to use just because 4,000 is not a very
but
big
even
context
but even
window.
if you set aside the context window, even if you set aside that,
Yeah, no, I know they can't do tool calling either, right?
right, even if you set aside the context window and you say, well, the context window doesn't matter because we're loading MCP dynamically now, which is what the rest of the industry is
Yeah.
doing. You just don't have that smart a model to orchestrate dynamic tool calling.
Right.
And so if only because of that, I think it's going to be the cloud model dealing with the orchestration and dealing with, like when I mention orchestration, if the user says, can you remind me when my next scheduled meeting with John is, and also add it to my task manager. That's a whole bunch of information that you gotta sort of organize and make sense of. Like where
Right.
is the user storing the events? Who's John? When's this meeting? What task manager are they
What are
using?
the
Like,
actions that apply
what are
to
the actions?
these?
What's the schema like? And I
Yeah.
don't think an on-device model can do that. So
Right.
I think it's gonna all be based on the cloud model,
Yeah.
and the MCP bridge is likely necessary because Gemini knows how to speak MCP. It doesn't know how to speak app intents unless Apple worked a miracle in the past 6 months and they set up a whole system for Gemini to understand whatever schema that they plan on rolling out for app intents.
Let me ask you this: if it is MCP based, do you think Apple would open it up to other providers?
No.
Potentially.
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they will. I think the extensions that we have seen rumored in Bloomberg, like that you will be able to connect your Cloud account, those will probably just be for having additional sources in Siri.
Yeah.
like the extensions basically. But I expect
Without be able to call tools or anything like that, right?
no.
Yeah.
I mean, happy to be proven wrong, obviously. I don't, but from the sound of it, it doesn't seem like they
No,
are
it doesn't.
making this Siri like a provider agnostic type of thing. There's going to be the new series all be based on Apple Intelligence. Apple Intelligence I don't think it's even going to be branded as Gemini anything. It's just going to be Apple Intelligence, and Apple Intelligence is able to get your contacts, get your tools, perform actions, on-screen awareness. The Claude, ChatGPT, God forbid even Grok, are just going to be extensions, right? And for web search and general world knowledge.
Maybe somebody will be able to reverse engineer it and figure out how they connect together. I mean,
probably, but if it's the type of thing where the MCP bridge needs a private entitlement for it to work, you're not going to be able to do anything on iOS and iPadOS at least.
right.
Maybe you can reverse engineer some of it on macOS. The problem, I think, is that they're going to make this MCP bridge that is cryptographically signed to your iCloud account on private cloud compute. And so that's pretty much locked.
Yeah.
So, but that's sort of the big picture of what I think is going to happen. I think they will ship what they promised 2 years ago, but in a slightly different way from what was announced.
Yeah. We should talk a little bit about shortcuts too, because on the one hand, I think that the Shortcuts app as we know it today it's not, I don't think it'll go away, but I think it's going to take something of a backseat. But that doesn't mean that Shortcuts doesn't have a big role to play as part of what's announced at this WWDC, because the rumors are that you're going to be able to use natural language to create shortcuts, very much like what you did with Shortcuts Playground. And I know you have some thoughts about what the shape of that might be, but to me, it's very, there are two things I'd like from Shortcuts. One is I'd love to be able to do the natural language stuff, because I think you're right that a lot of what you had to reverse engineer, obviously Apple has hooks deep into its own system. It probably can do it a little more reliably, even though Shortcuts Playground is very reliable as it is. But the other thing I would like Apple to do is really, even though maybe Shortcuts is going to take a little bit of a backseat to using it via Siri, I would love to see it, them spend some time and just tighten up the app itself, because I find that the app is still got it's just got a lot of bugs in it still, that things just go sideways in the Shortcuts app all the time. And I'd love to see all that stuff kind of like cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah. I don't think Apple cares particularly about the idea of letting more users discover the advanced Shortcuts capabilities. I think Apple could easily sell, though, the idea of setting up routines, simple shortcuts, simple things, just with natural language. I think they're going to have their own Shortcuts Playground, and I think it's going to be better than mine for those things. Whether they change the underlying shortcuts syntax to be less reliant on XML and maybe even proprietary, that's a possibility. I think even if they stick with XML, it's going to be more reliable than mine when it comes to connecting variables and filling in parameters, because they can do some pretty aggressive, and obviously they have more resources than me when it comes to teaching the model how to deal with that. Right. I think it's going to be better than mine for simple shortcuts. I think that's going to be their pitch, that anything that you do routinely on your phone, you can now just set up an automation with Shortcuts Playground using it. I don't think it's going to be as reliable as mine and as powerful as mine when it comes to the nerdy stuff that you can do with Shortcuts Playground. I don't think you will be able to open up the Apple Shortcuts Playground, or whatever it's going to be called. I guess if it's called that, they're going to send me a cease and desist or something. But I don't think you will be able to open the Apple version and say, hey, build me a shortcut that talks to the Todoist API and performs actions
or
with
runs
my account.
a script or something.
Or runs a script on my Mac, or runs SSH things on my Mac Mini. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be great for third-party app intents, which is something that I intentionally do not support because, again, I don't have the resources. But I think my theory is that there'll still be a place for Shortcuts Playground as a tool for power users and advanced users, and I'm more than happy to take that slot. But I think Apple will try and sell it as, oh, now if every morning you wake up and you realize that you open the shutters and you turn on the kitchen light and you want to start your coffee machine remotely, now you can just type that sentence in and that will become shortcuts thanks to Apple Intelligence.
Right.
That sort of pitch.
Right. It'll be like send so and so a text message when I leave my office to come home from work. That kind of thing, which is you could set that up pretty quickly manually, but if you're not interested in getting into the guts of the Shortcuts app, that could be done pretty simply with an LLM. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Things from Cultured Code. If you want to achieve a goal, you have to have a plan, and when it comes to making a plan, there's no better tool than the award-winning Things app. The idea behind Things is simple. Create a project for each of your goals, then add steps to reach those goals, and finally, schedule when you want to work on them. Each morning when you wake up, Things has already prepared your list of to-dos for the day. Just spend a few minutes reviewing the list, put your to-dos in the order you plan to do them, and get on with your day. It doesn't matter which device you're on. Your to-dos sync through the cloud, so they're always with you on your computer, in your pocket, and on your wrist. You can also connect your calendars to see your events, schedule to-dos that automatically repeat, write notes with Markdown, and a whole lot more. But when it comes to Things, what you'll love more than any single feature is the app's design. It doesn't just look good, it feels good to use. It's a native app made to a very high standard of quality and a 2-time winner of the Apple Design Award. So if you haven't tried Things, you should check out the latest version. Head on over to the website things.app. That's things.app. Learn about all the great features and Things. Download a free trial for the Mac, and you can find it on the App Store. Just search for Things. Whatever it is you want to accomplish in life, Things can help you get there. Try Things today at things.app. You won't regret it. Our thanks to Things for their support of the show. Let's kind of go through some more of the wishes. One of the things that I want to see, and this is a very developer-oriented thing, but right now developers only have access to the on-device model. There are some developers who have built in clever hooks to shortcuts in order to access private cloud compute as part of their apps, but that requires a trip to Shortcuts, or it's a little hacky basically. And I think what I'd like to see is developers have the ability to, very much like Apple has done with WeatherKit, is have a way to use private cloud compute, maybe have some sort of free tier up to a certain amount of usage, and then have it paid after that. Because after all, I mean, there are costs associated with this server kind of stuff, just like there is with WeatherKit. But what I'd really like to see is Apple to find a way, from a business standpoint for developers, to make the cost of that use of private cloud compute something that's predictable and projectable, so that if someone's building an app and they want to charge $5 a month, they'll know they'll have a sense in advance whether they're going to be able to cover that with their subscription. I don't know exactly how that works, but I'd like to see, one, it opened up, and two, opened up in a way that makes it more usable than a lot of what developers have to deal with when they're working with APIs from like OpenAI or Anthropic.
But do you think developers would want to switch away from Claude or Codex because of this?
If they give them the right business deal, I would think they would. One, security, private cloud compute. Two, predictability on cost. makes it
But you
easier
don't
to run
mean
their
for
business.
development. You mean for AI features
Oh, no,
in their
not for
apps.
development.
Okay.
I mean
Okay.
I'm talking about LLMs that are incorporated
Right.
into apps for
Okay.
so
Yeah.
like
Then.
so
Yeah.
like right. So like when SQL, for instance, uses an LLM to figure out what to drop into SQL based on the article you're reading, give SQL a way to do that on private cloud compute and not just have to use the on-device model. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. My wish is for, first of all, the new App Intents thing to be real and to finally ship. So this idea that we're going to have, over the past couple of years, you and I, we've been using LLMs that have external integrations, first with MCPs, then with CLIs. This idea that you're bringing your favorite tools into the chatbot or into the coding agent. That's extremely powerful, right? To be able to automate Spark that we use for email or to find messages on Slack and stuff like that. I really want this App Intents framework to be the native on-device equivalent of that, so that all the apps that I use, I can also use an LLM and search inside Spark and search in Slack and search in my calendar, in my task manager. Like that, I think could be an extremely powerful concept. But I don't want it to be limited to voice. I really hope that this ships as a way for you to ask Siri with your voice questions like the famous Apple commercial that they pulled when Apple Intelligence didn't ship, but also to have chatbot text interactions with them. I want to be able to text, what's the latest draft in my working copy app?
Yeah.
I want to be able to text it and to get a text response with a visual snippet of that application in the Siri chatbot UI. So whatever they do, I hope it's real, and I hope it's not limited to voice, and I hope that it's multimodal in that sense, right? That I can use those apps however I'm talking or speaking to Siri.
And then it deep links back into the app that it's giving you information about, right? So you can easily go right in there and start working on working copy or whatever you're doing. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I want. I think that that ad is kind of instructive. I mean, it was it was at a party and the voice commands were being used, and that makes for a good commercial. But I think if you're at a party, most people are going to want to.
You're going to be typing.
You're going to be typing. You're not going to be muttering into your phone. Who's the guy across the room who I met last week? I think that that's much more likely to be something that you would type in real life. All right, Federico. Here's my big one. I want. I'm going to give you two, and they're both related to the iPad. One we've already talked about, which is screen sharing. There's a lot of reasons to have screen sharing to allow you to check on Macs that are off doing things for you with LLMs. The other is, I think it's time to bring Terminal to both the phone and the iPad. We didn't talk about that in our iOS.
Imagine Cloud Code on an iPad.
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of good apps out there for connecting back to a Mac using a terminal-style iOS or iPadOS app. I've tried a lot of them, and there's always a certain amount of friction because they are not system apps. And I think if Apple were to do this, I'm sorry to say it would probably kill an entire category that has been very active in the last 2 years. However, I think it would kill that category because it could be so much better than what exists.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would be so happy to see that, obviously. It would need to happen with a terminal sandbox.
Yes.
And in the sandbox, you can install Python, you can install Ruby, you can install Next.js, you can spin up a local web dev server in the sandbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't be able to use things like Playwright or Claude in Chrome, because obviously you cannot install Chrome in the sandbox. But it would need to be, it would be a pretty serious effort to have a virtualized sandbox where you can install whatever you want and whatever you want, probably I'm guessing would give you a local user space, right? So the equivalent of, because you wouldn't have a desktop, you wouldn't have a downloads folder.
No, but
right?
I would like to have the sandbox environment you're talking about, but also with hooks back into a Mac if you want them, so that you can have things happening on your Mac and then securely passed back to your iOS
Right. So
or
it would need
iPadOS
to
device.
have internet access, right?
Yeah.
Because it would need to talk externally.
Yeah.
But whatever comes back is sandbox to the terminal location.
Right.
I mean, with enough money and time and skilled engineers, everything is doable these days. It's only a matter of politics and priorities and strategy, right? So I would love to see it. I don't think it's going to happen this year,
I
but
don't
I would
either.
love to see it.
No, I don't either. But I mean, I've been trying a bunch more of these, and every time I use one, I feel like developers are really inching closer and closer to really good experiences on iOS and iPadOS with these terminal style apps. But there's always some friction. There's always something going on that makes it a little hard.
Yeah.
What else you have?
What was the second one? You mentioned you had two big things.
Oh, well, it was just that was the screen sharing, which we already talked about
yes,
in the
yes.
iOS episode.
So when it comes to, when it comes to the natural language shortcuts creation, I hope that in addition to I hope that you will be able to create one-off shortcuts, but also personal automations. And I would like to see some kind of new design for those.
Yeah.
I think you should be able, for example, and I'm thinking of the automations in Codex for Mac, right?
Yeah.
In any time in Codex on the Mac, you can open a regular chat and you can say, hey, can you pull up my automation for, I don't know, triaging my email? And so I hope that you will be able to open the Siri chatbot and say, hey, can we take a look at my automations? And it pulls up like a visual preview. Here's the automations that you have set up. And do you want to make changes to them? And it would be nice, for example, to get a visual preview of the automation, like 7 a.m., turn on these lights.
Right.
And you request a change, and in line in the visual snippet, you see the change being made to the automation. So instead of 7 a.m., they turn on at 7:30 a.m., for example. So I think setting up personal automations, routines, whatever you want to call them, they've always had a learning curve for regular users because most people don't think about automating things.
Right.
But there's potential for a system to let you create them easily, perhaps even proactively suggest automations for you based on things that the system thinks you're doing on a regular schedule. I don't know. But I think there's a story to tell, not just about creating shortcuts with natural language, but creating and managing your automations with natural language.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. The other thing I kind of want to see in the Siri app is a mix of models approach, the way Perplexity and Notion do it, where you can let Siri kind of choose. You can swap between what models you have connected. You can switch them, or you can let the system pick whichever it thinks is the best. I think that's for the company that's not actually making most of the models that are going to be part of Apple Intelligence, that's a powerful direction to go with this stuff.
Yeah. What else you got?
So I kind of would like Apple to make codecs for Xcode, like their own version of codecs, something that's a developer coding tool that is not Xcode. I mean, I think Xcode is a great app, and I think it ought to survive. But I do think that there are a lot of people who have kind of graduated to first, coding inside the terminal, and then move to these more graphical versions, which have access to the terminal and access to various Xcode tools and other things. And I feel like that's the future for a lot of young developers, is not so much being in a traditional IDE, but being in some sort of codex or Claude Code style window where they can draw in a bunch of different tools and iterate real quickly that way. I don't think they'll do it.
Yeah, Xcode feels increasingly not with the times.
Yeah.
Especially since development is moving to a more agentic type of workflow where you're given instructions and you don't need to see the different sections of an IDE like Xcode, for example. You're just providing feedback, assigning roles to agents and sub-agents, then testing, opening in browser, opening in simulator, taking screenshots, taking screen recordings, passing them back. The agent deals. I mean, I have built iOS apps for myself. The agent can deal with things like provisioning profiles or
Right.
setting up multiple simulators. Like all of that legacy is obviously necessary because you got to distribute those apps somewhere. But maybe it's time for a leaner, more modern experience that abstracts some of that visual complexity away from
Right.
people, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking of. I mean, it's not that I would get rid of all the parts of Xcode that exist today. It's just that I think the focus needs to change, where it should be more of an orchestration of agents. And then when you do need to look at the code, you open up a panel that shows you the things that have changed. You get like a diffing tool, or you get just the raw code itself, and you have a terminal that you can slide up. I mean, I think Codex does a really nice job of all this, better than Anthropic does, and it's a powerful tool. I mean, it would be really cool to see something like that coming and built on with from Apple.
Yeah. What else do we have? Let's see.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, additional domains for App Intents. I think
right.
when Apple announced Apple Intelligence 2 years ago, there was 14 app domains, but only some of them shipping initially in September. Sure, it never happened. None of it ever happened.
I'm a little surprised they didn't add to these last year, to be honest, because there's a whole big
Why
areas.
would you add to them if you're not using that
Well, I know, but
infrastructure anymore?
People could still start building for them. I mean, they
Can
are
you
used.
imagine? Can you imagine if they move away from all of that for something new, and developers who did the work for something that never shipped now they have to do it again?
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, there are areas like I don't think like health and fitness is covered, or media, like categorizing media on your device like music or video or whatever. So yeah, I agree. I think that should be greatly expanded, because I think it's going to be. One of my concerns about App Intents is that people have forgotten just how limited they were initially, and even if now the plumbing is in place to use them, there's going to be some frustration over where the boundaries lie with App Intents.
Yeah. You have one in your list that I think we should discuss. The idea of integrating App Intents across multiple apps.
Yes.
What did you have in mind?
So I mean, and this is one that I actually don't think will happen, but right now the way App Intents are designed to work is that these are actions that apps can do that now the OS can call on to do them in an automated way. What I'd like to do is have the ability for one developer to call another developer's actions in their apps, make these like component parts that can be remixed by third-party developers. So what would that be like? Maybe the Readwise app could call good links, pull a URL out of good links, and then display it using Readwise Reader's parsing engine. That kind of thing. It would have to be the sort of thing that there would have to be some sort of system of consent, I think, for that, for it to work from an economic standpoint. But I think, especially for indie developers, it's a tight community, and I think there are places where doing that sort of thing could complement multiple apps without feeling like someone was taking someone's work and using it as their own. So I'm definitely thinking of this as a collaborative tool, not so much as a just grab whatever is available on someone's device and try to use it.
Yeah, the issue is obviously sandboxing again, because
it is absolutely.
But if they can come up with some kind of structured data format, extensions that run isolated from each other, and maybe there's even the on-device classifier in the middle that says, is this dangerous for the next app to receive or not? Like we've seen those type of things. This is tangentially related to what you mentioned, but this idea of you have two LLMs, one big model in the cloud, one running locally. The one running locally is sort of evaluating data
Right.
for the risk of prompt injection and stuff like that. Simon Willison theorized this approach a couple of years ago. Google, of all companies, has a white paper on this system called Camel, I think.
I think that's what it's called, yeah.
Where they're using this dual LLM approach, with one simply acting as a almost as a traffic light, saying, is this good to go? Then go. Is this dangerous? Stop.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe a system like that could help.
Think of it as sort of an LLM-based gatekeeper thing where there's only certain kinds of data that can be passed and they need to be evaluated as they pass through the system, URLs, text, that's images, that sort of thing. And obviously there are privacy and security risks there, so that all that would have to be addressed along the way.
I think we can wrap up the main show here, John.
I think we can.
You have a fun topic for AppStories Plus.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about research and how we're approaching those kind of things for WWDC. I think I may be onto something. It's still too early to be sure because it hasn't been battle tested yet. But I know you and I talked about this a little bit recently on AppStories Unwind, but I'm a lot further along than I was when we spoke about that originally. So I want to kind of give folks an update and talk a little bit about kind of the structure of what I'm trying to build. And then we'll know after WWDC whether it actually worked or not.
Okay.
All right, Federico. Well, that's it for today's episode of App Stories. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode. That's Things by Cultured Code. You can find the two of us over at macstories.net. And of course, we are on social media where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.